Welcome back to Recharging the Human Battery. We are on AM 950 radio, and it's so good to be back for the third episode here of the show. So let's talk about recharging the human battery. Where did that even come from? So as a spine surgeon turned wellness advocate, deciding to dive deep into the wellness and holistic world, we at some point made a decision to move forward and start putting up wellness centers here in Minnesota called Hypercharge Centers, now having 3 across the state and growing. So when we did this project, we really wanted to come up with a tagline that really describes what we're doing. Now, if you listen to the previous episodes, we did talk a lot about mitochondrial health and jump-starting your mitochondria. We talked a little bit about what it means to recharge our own personal batteries, just like we recharge our laptops and our phones and really everything else in our life. Imagine a world where the electricity went out, there was a big, huge, pulse and an electromagnetic wave that just destroyed everything, and we couldn't charge anything, right? The mass panic, the mass depression that would happen would be incredible. So if it is so catastrophic that we can't recharge our cell phone or our laptops or whatever else we need for our daily use, then why don't we feel the same about our own human bodies? We need to start thinking in that way. And that's where that phrase, recharging the human battery, came from. And so a lot of what we do in health and wellness, when we drill down to the microscopic level, is really targeting improving mitochondrial health, which is the powerhouse of the cell. And so what better way to do that than one of my absolute favorite topics that I thought we would talk about the whole time today, which is biohacking. So what is biohacking? Now, you guys hear us talking all the time about what we should do in our lifestyles to improve our cellular health, our mitochondrial health. And that's going to include, exercise, diet, taking care of your microbiome, being in states of joy, happiness, releasing our hormones of love, all of these things, taking care of our mental health, stimulating our parasympathetic nervous system. Those are ways to do it, which in some sense take some periods of time, right? It's going to take a while to see changes in your diet. Now, what are biohacks? Biohacks are things that we can do to jumpstart our batteries, and sometimes it can be more immediate. So what are we going to talk about today? What are some of the favorite biohacks out there that have the most research behind them? A big one is photobiomodulation, or the use of red light therapy. We're going to talk about laser therapy, which is a more powerful form of photobiomodulation and utilizing light therapy to make changes in tissues. We're going to talk about oxygen therapy. So there's different ways to do it. You can exercise while under a large amount of oxygen, or you can go in a hyperbaric chamber. We'll talk about some of the differences between those things. We're going to talk about vagal nerve stimulation. We're going to talk about water therapy. We're going to talk about Newcom device, which are these binaural beats that can actually change your brain waves and put you in more calm states like alpha waves. We are going to talk about transcranial magnetic stimulation and other things which have really revolutionized the game when it comes to psychiatric care and mental health disorders. It's interesting because even 2 years ago, as a surgeon, I was quite unfamiliar with the whole biohacking space. I had always known there were these famous biohackers out there, but honestly, I wasn't really focusing on it. After 2 years of diving deep into the research, I could not be more excited about bringing this out to the general public, putting my name behind it, talking about the tremendous scientific data behind it. So if you want to learn more, hang out here, and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, and welcome back to Recharging the Human Battery. We are on AM 950 radio, and hopefully that little first segment got you guys fired up about biohacking. And I hope at the end of this you really learn a little bit about biohacking and start doing your own research and seriously considering some of these modalities to really make significant differences. Now, I'm not saying this because I want to, sell you the things that I use personally in my own life or anything like that. I'm telling you legitimately as a physician who has done the research and I cannot tell you how much basic science, how many articles I've poured through, making sure that before I speak on these subjects, I'm very comfortable really putting my name behind it, talking about it, and understanding that obviously there's going to be some pushback on these issues, especially from the traditional medical community. But you know why? The reason that there's pushback on a lot of these biohacks is frankly because we're not taught this. We're not taught this in school. I never heard of photomedicine. That word never was uttered a day in medical school. It continues not to be uttered, I'm sure. Maybe at some institutions where they have photomedicine labs like Harvard, they may or may not talk about it. I don't know. I welcome you to let me know in the comments if you've heard it, if you were in medical school yourself or you have some knowledge of this. But in general, these are things that are not talked about. So on a previous episode, we talked about how we don't talk about nutrition and microbiome health and all these other things. We get very little of that in our own personal medical training. So now we're going into topics and technologies that I can assure you that I got zero training on this stuff. So when it was new to me, I was the most skeptical person on these biohacks that you can imagine. And it did not take very long once I opened up my mind and said, listen, let me dive into the research, where I became a believer. And now, I don't want to call myself an evangelist, because when you call yourself an evangelist, then people just think you're trying to sell them something. But really what I'm trying to do is share knowledge and excitement about really what is the future of medicine. Before I get into red light therapy, let me tell you how I spent my day yesterday and the day before. I spent my day going through a Harvard TEDx Talk application, which, by the way, is probably as long as the medical school application for some reason. But that being said, it was on a talk that I am proposing for TEDx on red light therapy and how it's going to revolutionize medicine and be a significant tool against the scourge of chronic disease, which, despite increasing spending, increasing technology, we are losing that battle. Obesity rates, diabetes rates, all kinds of other chronic diseases, mental health, it's all worsening. It's all worsening here in the West, where we're pouring dollars into our sick care system, and we need to do something about it. And I'm a big believer in photobiomodulation, red light therapy, laser therapy, and other modalities to at least be a tool in the toolbox to help us fight against this horrible crisis that is in front of us. Also, for those folks that are thinking, hey, I'm fine, I feel great. Well, guess what? These biohacks can make a significant difference, scientifically proven, in the way your body works, in those trillions of cells, can make them work better, can fire up your mitochondrial engines, recharging the human battery, so to speak, and get you even more efficient, feeling better, working harder, doing whatever you need to do, being more present with your family. So on that note, let's dive into photobiomodulation and red light therapy and what is it. So how about this? Let's go back to when photobiomodulation may have initially gotten its start. Let's talk 1666. This was a year referred to as Annus Mirabilis, or the miraculous year in history. Why? During this year, Isaac Newton made groundbreaking discoveries in the world of optics, and he demonstrated that sunlight could be split into different wavelengths using a prism. You all know this. You go down to the Science Museum here in Minnesota, you got the little prism, and you shine the light through, and guess what? It breaks it up into different colors. This was really a foundation in our understanding on how light works and how different frequencies of light works. Now, let's fast forward about 100 years to 1879 when Thomas Edison really invented the first practical electric light bulb. This really revolutionized the way we use light, where we're actually harnessing the power of light, and this really has led to so many different light-related technologies and advancements. Now, moving a little bit forward, 20 years after that, the Danish physician Dr. Finson used ultraviolet light therapy, to treat a type of tuberculosis. He won the Nobel Prize in 1903 for using light therapy to cure disease or to help disease. 1903, folks. It's 2024, and most of you are not aware of how we can harness the power of light to heal ourselves and to heal so many different conditions. And there's the frustration. So the modern era in the 1960s began with a physician named Andre Mester. He discovered that low-level light therapy, so this is like low-level laser therapy, or what we would call like a class 1 laser, was absolutely able to heal wounds and grow hair in rats. That's something you guys might be aware of, that light therapy is used for hair regrowth. And so it really increased the understanding of how we can use light therapy today in our society. Now, this is one of the things that fascinates me the most. In the 1990s, NASA began to conduct all of these experiments about plants in space. And what did they find as kind of an offspring of it? They found that lesions, skin lesions, so injuries, to the skin, were healing much faster in astronauts when they were exposed to red light, But yet, we still are not using red light today for most non-healing wounds, and we need to make an absolute change. From there, everything is history. There was development of lasers. There was development of machines, beds that could deliver red light on a much bigger basis to the human body through higher levels of power or irradiance. And those are the modern machines that you see today. So let's talk about the science of this, because we really have to understand the science. And if we can't explain the science to people that don't know anything about this, then it's never going to really take off, because there's going to be skepticism. Because again, how can you just use light to heal things? That doesn't make sense to people, but it's true. So one of the best analogies that we can use is that photosynthesis, helps plants to grow. I don't think there's many deniers of this. And my good friend, Dr. Scott Sigman, the founder of Ortho Laser, which is a large developing franchise in the United States that uses photobiomodulation and laser therapy, he put me on to this when he came on my show. And so when he has skeptical doctors around him, he just says, do you believe in photosynthesis? Does that work? And they say, oh, yes, absolutely. And so it is exactly the same mechanism, like there are something called chromophores in plants, and chlorophyll. In the human body, in mitochondria, there are complexes in the mitochondrial wall, again, the powerhouse of the cell, that can absorb light. And then by absorbing light, that allows the production of something called ATP, which is the gasoline of the cell. And that then powers the engine of the cell and holds a whole host of other changes, which we will discuss on later episodes with other experts and guests that are going to really get down into the nitty-gritty of this if you're really into it. So really how it works is when you shine a light in the near infrared range, it penetrates that mitochondrial wall, stimulates ATP production, and then it changes everything. So imagine trillions of cells changing the way they work. So we can change the way brain cells work and the way skin cells work and the way, liver cells work, all kinds of things if you shine the right frequency of light. And what is most effective for mitochondrial health is the near infrared range, which is in the 800 nanometer range. Now, there are other things like green light therapy and blue light therapy and things like that that we'll discuss in other segments. Now, there's massive anti-inflammatory effects. It increases blood flow. Red light, when penetrated through the tissues, does all kinds of favorable things that can lead to healing. So I urge you to go and look at some of the studies and NASA and healing of wounds. There's all kinds of stuff on skin rejuvenation and improving all kinds of brain diseases through what's called transcranial photobiomodulation. Again, this is all working through stimulating those powerhouses of the cell. And so if you are not excited about this, if my medical colleagues are not excited, I don't know what to do. We can use such a simple technology to create so much change in the body. Now, let's talk briefly about the use of this in the brain world. Okay, so the lab at Harvard, run by Dr. Paolo Cassano, who I have gotten to know through my podcast and other things, talks about the power of light to be actually able to penetrate the skull and then affect human brain cells. And so it is being researched in things like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. There are studies that show a reduction of over 50% of the tremor in Parkinson's patients after just weeks of treatment. Folks, this is a big deal, okay? Shining a light to the frontal lobe can improve cognitive function in normal subjects and subjects that have significant cognitive decline. Do you understand what the potential implications are of these types of biohacks down the road? And this is why I want to stand on that stage at Harvard and talk to the world about the potential applications of photobiomodulation going down the road. Now, we don't have time for this on this show because I want to get into other biohacks, but I can tell you what we've seen personally in our wellness centers where we treat patients with photobiomodulation are dramatic improvements in things like chronic disease, wound healing, pain, and other brain-related disorders as well. And we will talk about this later down the road. One quick mention that I want to talk about in photobiomodulation is there is a lot of discussion now about the power of utilizing red light therapy in post-COVID syndrome, in which millions of people are suffering from post-COVID syndrome. And so there are clear studies that show that either treating through the brain or treating the entire body can create a dramatic improvement in post-COVID syndrome. And I can tell you that we've treated many people with post-COVID and other post-viral syndromes that have had incredible turnaround in their function. Now, again, it's not specifically FDA approved yet for post-COVID syndrome, but again, the FDA deems light therapy or photobiomodulation as having clinically insignificant risk. So I can say very comfortably as a physician, I've seen many patients with post-COVID syndrome, post-Lyme's disease, and other post-viral syndromes have dramatic benefit from the use of light therapy. Now let's dive into laser therapy. What is laser therapy? How is that different than light therapy? Well, it's just a more powerful form. With the advent of new technologies, we've been able to develop laser technology that then can really focus the beam, and the more powerful the device you have, the deeper you can penetrate into the tissues. And so laser therapy, with class 4 being the most powerful, allows us to specifically target areas of interest. So, for example, if you have an injury to your ankle, or you have a hamstring injury, or you want to penetrate the brain more deeply, or you want to penetrate to the heart or to the lungs, laser therapy allows a much more deeper penetration, but the mechanism of action is the same. One of the other advantages to using laser treatment for more acute issues and more precise targeting is that it also creates a significant dampening in nerve signals that go back to the brain. And so it is a complex situation where the laser can decrease the inflammation around nerves, decrease the secretion of substances which are highly inflammatory and cause pain. And so many people that have laser therapy, it can experience immediate reduction in pain, but over time, it can create healing of tissues, reduction in pain, and overall much faster return to better life with less pain. So why is this also exciting? Think about what we just talked about in decreasing the ability to decrease pain. Imagine having technologies that can decrease the use of opioids in our society. Imagine having technologies that in a post-surgical period can make people recover faster, need less medications, and basically get back to their normal lives much faster. The technologies are here. They're right in front of us. We are using them, but it is so wildly underpenetrated. This is the mission of many of us physicians that have come over to the light side. Okay, no pun intended, where we are so excited about these technologies to be used in all kinds of settings to help people to manage their pain in this environment. Not to mention that there are so many people that really have looked at so many other options and therapies for all these different conditions and then have found some relief or some improvement in their syndrome from light therapy. Okay, I have a lot of examples of people that have lesions. I have one woman that has these terrible oral lesions, which we treated with laser therapy with 100% relief in her condition. And actually, we're going to write that one up. It's a very interesting case. So again, this is why we're so excited about laser therapy. Let's dive into another potential modality, which I actually knew about as a spine surgeon. It's really fascinating. It's called pulsed electromagnetic frequency therapy. Now, some of you guys have heard about grounding, right? So the earth has a certain magnetism. Okay, in other words, there's a magnet that surrounds all of us. When you walk barefoot on the ground, you get some of that magnetism, and that's what we call grounding or earthing, right? So walking barefoot is very healthy for us because it also creates those electrical charges that recharge our cells. But what does pulsed electromagnetic frequency do? They're actually devices that release magnetic energy and frequency around us and can create all kinds of positive benefits for cellular health. Where did I learn first about pulsed electromagnetic frequency? I've been using this since I first started as a spine surgeon. There are these belts that we recommend to our patients when they have spinal fusion, and they're basically pulsed electromagnetic frequency devices. And there has been tremendously studied the healing of bone fractures and of bone fusions in the presence of the proper magnetic field. And so this is something I've been using on my patients since I started, 18 years ago here in practice, but I wasn't really introduced to utilizing pulsed electromagnetic frequency for all kinds of ailments, again, until about 2 years ago, when I opened my mind and started to really learn about what is out here. Now, pulsed electromagnetic frequency therapy goes way, way back into the 1950s, where research already was coming out of the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. And they were talking about treating conditions like fractures, arthritis, inflammation, and all kinds of other stuff. We didn't start doing it in the United States until the 1970s, but now the technology is more frequently used. I often will refer my own patients for pulsed electromagnetic frequency therapy. Again, it decreases inflammation. It'll jumpstart your cells. It's positive for mitochondria. It can help with fracture management. Now, take that and mix it with our other modalities that we're talking about, and you get a powerful cocktail of human battery recharging, mitochondrial and cellular recharging. Now, pulsed electromagnetic frequency. What are one of the things that I'm most excited about with pulsed electromagnetic frequency? Again, there are settings that can help almost any condition. These things are available, widely online. There's more medical grade types that we have in our wellness centers that are more powerful. However, what am I really excited about with PEMF? One of the things we know is that in the presence of pulsed electromagnetic field, bone density, bone architecture improves. What are one of the biggest problems in the United States right now and in the world? Fractures of fragility or osteoporosis. Now, we are going to make a big push in earlier detection of osteoporosis and osteopenia, especially in women, because it is widely underdiagnosed. With newer technologies such as the REMS bone scan coming out of Europe, where it's a little bit more readily accessible, it gives a fragility score. We're going to discuss this with an expert in a future episode. We're going to start doing screening earlier and earlier on people for bone density and bone architecture issues. Why is this exciting? Because in the presence of pulsed electromagnetic frequency at the right frequencies, this has been shown to reverse bone loss and improve bone architecture. So imagine a world where we screen early, we pick up bone density issues, and then we're treating, especially women, although men have an increasing rate of osteoporosis as well. We treat people early when they're found to have bone density issues with the most simple thing, a magnetic field, okay? In addition to other things like exercise and protein intake and things like that. But mostly my excitement from a biohacking standpoint is to use pulsed electromagnetic frequency on a regular basis, which will improve bone density, and we can make a huge difference and a huge impact in so many things utilizing pulsed electromagnetic fields. Now, let's go to a couple other maybe less known biohacks which have just tremendous value that we've seen. Now, many of you are familiar with something called hyperbaric oxygen chambers. Now, the HBOT. Why am I familiar with the HBOT? Well, some of you know that when I was an intern, only from my social media posts, but when I was an intern, my very first rotation, I got the short straw, by the way, but my very first rotation was the burn unit at Cornell. And so one of the areas where the hyperbaric oxygen chamber is used in non-healing wounds, including burns. And so I was more familiar with this as a physician. And so when people say, hey, hyperbaric chambers have tremendous health benefits and health effects, that's not hard for physicians to wrap their minds around. Why? We've heard of it. We've heard of it before. We've seen it in practice, so a little bit easier. So I want to talk about how a hyperbaric chamber works versus exercise while under oxygen therapy, which is much less familiar to people. So in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, what are we doing? We are pressurizing the chamber under pure oxygen and pushing the oxygen into your tissue. So we're hyperoxygenating your blood cells, right? Your oxyhemoglobin and hemoglobin. And so we're supercharging the blood cells and getting oxygen into areas it doesn't normally get. This has tremendous healing benefits, wound healing, function of organs. We can go on and on. Recovery from chronic illnesses. We've used oxygen therapy for post-COVID situations. There's just a lot of uses for oxygen therapy. One of the downsides of hyperbaric oxygen chamber, which is very effective, there's a lot of good research on it, is the pressurization. So you have to be more careful with lung health, and you can have issues with that. Again, beyond the scope of this, it's more medical. But there are some risks with going in hyperbaric oxygen chamber. However, again, the benefits of hyperoxygenation are ironclad when you look at the science. Exercise while under oxygen is different, right? So when we're doing hyperbaric oxygen chamber, we're pushing the oxygen in. When we're doing EWOT or exercise while under oxygen, you are doing some type of activity that is putting you into a more anaerobic phase, right? So you're getting tired and breathing almost pure oxygen at the same time. So what happens? Your tissues are becoming more hypoxic or less oxygenated. What happens when they're more everything is saying, I need oxygen, I need oxygen. So if you're breathing pure oxygen, you're sucking that oxygen and you're pulling it into your cells and tissues, hyperoxygenating your blood. So if we think about the furthest tissues from your heart, right? The smallest capillaries, it's harder to get oxygen to those levels. If you either push or pull hyperoxygen to those areas, you can imagine you're flooding those areas with oxygen, and that can be a big healing component in anything. When you talk about soft tissue, when you talk about spinal cord injury, we can go on forever about the benefits of it. What are some of the advantages of exercise while under oxygen? Well, number one, you're not in a pressurized chamber. Number two, you can just do it for 10 minutes because as you're doing exercise and you're doing high-intensity interval work, you're breathing in pure oxygen. Now, we'll tell you, the studies show that doing exercise while under oxygen, independent of doing aerobic exercise, people's VO2 max increases. So in other words, your oxygen capacity gets better with just doing this. So doing this 2 to 3 times a week can dramatically improve chronic conditions, but it can also improve athletic performance and others and just daily performance. Even if you're a busy mom or dad, or you're just busy, or you're just overwhelmed, or you just have, you're just kind of down because you've got so much on your plate. Oxygen therapy, unbelievably well studied in science. We'll dive into that with some experts coming up. Now, one I know you've never heard of. And if you have, please put it in the comments because I'm impressed. So there's something called structured water therapy, okay? And a company, it's called ENG, E-N-G, and they produce a device called the Nano V. And what it does is produce structured water. Now, you can go on YouTube. There's really good people that have vetted this and have looked into it. It's very interesting. And so what you do is you basically sit down or stand up, but usually people will sit down and they inhale something called structured water. So this device produces water in a way that vibrates and orders in a certain sense without getting deep, because it actually took me months, by the way, to understand the science of this, despite the fact that they try to simplify it. It's very complicated. But what you are doing is you are developing something called a bioidentical signal. And so you are breathing in a water in a way that immediately gets distributed in the body. You're getting something called the bioidentical signal. That is stimulating a small amount of what we call reactive oxygen species. For those of you that are aware, if you have too many reactive oxygen species in your system, it is pro-inflammatory. In other words, it creates inflammation. If you just have a little bit of it, we have these beautiful inborn mechanisms that if you see a little bit of these almost toxic, I don't want to call them toxins. They're not really, it's not the right word, but it's a little bit of stimulation. It's like allergy testing, getting people used to a certain allergen in a tiny doses. Sometimes those things can help, right? Or getting used to whatever in tiny doses. If you're afraid of something, just trying little bits of it. So giving little bits and doses of reactive oxygen species from this bioidentical signal creates a cascade of anti-inflammatory effects. And so it can lead to decreased inflammation, a better blood flow. There are so many professional athletes, writers, all kinds of people that have used these devices and absolutely swear by them. And I can tell you, I'm one of them. I was super skeptical about this stuff, bought the device myself, started using it, really vetted the science, and I can tell you it makes a big difference. So what did we do in our own clinic to vet this? My partner, Tram, we decided to bring in an electrophysiologist and put a bunch of leads on his head and see how his brain was working. And I'm sorry for him. I'm just going to be honest. He wasn't in a great mood that day. It was the end of the day. He had been working for 10 plus hours. Tough day. And so we put these leads on his head and we did what's called a quantitative EEG. And the first thing the electrophysiologist said is, man, the frontal part of your brain is not connecting with the rest of your brain well. So a lot of his brain waves were disorganized. With 3 minutes of breathing in this bioidentical signal, 3 minutes, it looked like a bomb went off in his head. A positive bomb, by the way. It's probably not the best analogy, but his brain waves exploded. Okay? And then after 3 minutes, they continued to improve over time. These are the types of data points that we need to be more comfortable with these. And there is a bunch of research out there on this bioidentical signal and the Nano V device and how it works. And I will tell you, it took me a long time to incorporate this into kind of our wellness model and our wellness ideas. But once there is enough proof, and again, there is zero risk from the Nano V device, there is no reason why not to incorporate that. And again, think about everything we've talked about so far today, all of these different modalities. When you put them together, okay, 1 + 1 may not equal 2. It might equal 5. It might equal 10. So just imagine combining these biohacks into a beautiful cocktail of stimulation to your mitochondria, to your cells, to improve your your cellular health. Imagine what this can do over time to fight fatigue, chronic diseases, pain, and so many other conditions. This is why I could not be more fired up about this stuff. But again, I urge you, do your own research. Just want to mention a couple more things before we have to go to break here. So one of the things that's out there that is very popular today is the use of cold therapy. And I also certainly believe in cold therapy. It releases the body's own endorphins. It releases a whole bunch of chemical reactions. And this is something that has become acceptable by the public. Now, let's talk about how early we have reports of cold therapy. Let's go back to 3500 BC in Egypt. They were treating cold therapy to decrease inflammation and improve injuries, right? So that's 5,000 plus years ago. So through that, cold therapy has been studied quite a bit. There is a discovery that it improves the perception of pain, headaches, neuralgia, or kind of body pains related to nerves. It can do all kinds of things for skin conditions. Again, it's outside the scope of this, but I know people don't want me to leave out cold therapy. So yes, I do think that there are a lot of benefits to cold plunges, to cryotherapies, and other things. There's a lot of availability out there. You can just buy a simple, cold plunge device at home. You just put ice in your bathtub and do cold therapies. Again, I urge you to really read on it. There are some potential downsides, to cold therapy because, again, you're getting into that fight or flight mode temporarily. So it may not be for everybody, but certainly something that you should look into as a simple biohack, and certainly post-injury or post, high-level athletic events. And then, again, combining them with some of these other biohacks. The final thing I want to talk about, and again, if we really wanted to get into kind of way out there biohacks, some of which, by the way, have really good scientific data, we would be here for hours and hours. But one thing I do want to mention are vagal nerve stimulators. And so vagal nerve stimulators, so the vagal nerve is the main nerve that stimulates parasympathetic system. So there's two systems in our nervous system. There's the sympathetic system, fight or flight, and there's the parasympathetic system. That is the relaxed system. That's the system that gets really fired up when you meditate, when you're relaxed, when you're happy, when you're in love, those kinds of things. So we want to be in a parasympathetic state. There are many vagal nerve stimulators now on the market that are being used outside of the medical world, more on the wellness side, to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. And so if we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, we are mimicking what we can get in meditation and all these other things that I mentioned before. And so we want to be in those states. So combining that with other things, such as certain sounds and visualization and other things, we can really put people in these very deep parasympathetic states where, again, you're releasing the hormones of love. Sorry, I know you got to get used to a spine surgeon keep saying hormones of love. I know it'll take a while, but you'll get there because I'm going to say it constantly. But when we do this, the reactions in our body are nothing short of miraculous. Tremendous healing can take place. And again, like we said before, we can think ourselves sick, but more importantly, we can think ourselves well. So hopefully this discussion of modalities has got you fired up, has got you thinking. Get online, please. Do your own research, talk to people, start really thinking about how do I incorporate biohacks in my life? Do I believe this? Is it real? And for the doctors out there, please please take note of what we talk about and at least open up some journals, some textbooks, and learn a bit about this stuff. And I'm sure you'll come around just like I did. So we will see you guys on the other side of the break and final words and get this all wrapped up. And welcome back to this final segment of Recharging the Human Battery for today. We are on AM 950 radio, and I had a great time on today's show talking about my passion, which is biohacking. And boy, has it made a huge difference in my personal life. And I've seen, I can't even express how many people I've seen have a complete turnaround in their lives once they started using some of these biohacking modalities. It is incredible to see. My only, regret is that I did not hear about these things prior to 2 years ago, because it would have become a even bigger part of my life earlier and what I do and for myself. And I think I would have aged a lot slower had I known about these biohacks. And so hopefully you guys are already online while we are talking here, researching these biohacks. I would start with photobiomodulation and laser therapy. It is the future of how we are going to address so many of these complex issues that have arisen. And I could not be more excited to be talking everything photobiomodulation with you guys over the next several years, talking about it online, getting on stage, doing whatever I can to really promote this, and could not be more excited about partnering with guys like Dr. Scott Sigman, who founded Ortho Laser, which is really pioneering the way in the way we think about utilizing light therapy in orthopedics, and guys like Dr. Paolo Cassano, the head of the photobiomodulation lab at Harvard, that are going to change the world in their research and looking at the science of how light can change our brain health, and help us to reverse so many different diseases, or at least help, right? In a world where we are so focused on what's the next drug, what's the wonder drug, what is that quick fix, folks, we've got something right in front of us. And I will make the plea right here on air to the NIH, okay, National Institutes of Health, to all these other organizations and bodies out there. Yes, you know who you are. Those of you that are rejecting applications, even coming out of institutions like Harvard on photobiomodulation, think again about the dramatic changes we can make in this world if these modalities become mainstream and the go-to. Medical school deans, people that are responsible for this, please, let's start teaching photomedicine in our schools. I'm happy to come and help with that. Just email me. But we really need to be teaching our young students about the power of photomedicine and what it can do. We need to be trusting, right? This is a big buzzword since COVID, trust the science. Well, I can tell you, we've got plenty of science to trust when it comes to photomedicine, and I've seen it with my own eyes on real live people that have had these dramatic improvements like I talked about before. So on that note, I hope you are uber fired up about photobiomodulation, red light therapy, pulsed electromagnetic frequency, structured water, all kinds of oxygen therapy options out there. Take a look at these things, talk to families, see if people know about it. Ask your doctors, tell your doctors they need to learn about it if they don't know about it. And together, we can lead the revolution in health and wellness and well-being and get out of this hole that we have dug for ourselves with poor lifestyles, toxin exposure, and really the number one thing that I see as really stunting us as far as making a difference, misinformation. Let's cut through the noise together. So on that note, thanks for joining us today on Recharging the Human Battery. This has been a exciting episode for me personally. I'm trying to contain myself. We'll see you on the next show.